Yes, there is resistance. I think most people are, but I think they're doing it on their terms. I don't think mandates really work now.
That's Collin Burry, design director and principal at Gensler, who spent 27 years inside one of the most influential design firms in the world with workplaces for Apple, Pixar, Nike, Samsung, and Airbnb under his belt. He believes the future of workplace design is not about forcing people back into the office. It's about creating spaces that are human, useful, and worth coming back to.
To become frictionless means that the office or the space is not in my way of me doing my job. If you come in and it's hard to navigate the space, maybe you're going to a new office, you're the global company organization, and you're going to the new office for the first time or something, and you can't find your way around, you can't find people, you don't know where the coffee bar is, you don't know where the toilets are, or whatever it is.
In this episode, you'll learn which legacy workplace design rules are quietly creating friction on your projects, what Colin actually means when he says workplace design needs to become frictionless, and how to start applying his human-first design language on your next brief without overhauling your practice. I'm Sylvanna VanderPark, and this is Workspace Design Lab. You've spent 27 years inside one of the most influential design firms on the planet. And now you're openly saying the rulebook that the industry runs on is part of the problem. What changed for you, and when did you know?
Great question. I think, in my career, it's funny because I think I've done this now 40 years in June next month, which is crazy.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, and I've survived. Now I've been at Gensler almost 29 years actually, and also in June, which has been an amazing journey. But I think what's been really fascinating is that you see the industry change pretty majorly over the course of time, right? So there's different sort of eras. And, I think this era, the change that's about to happen is actually, I think we're like midstream or whatever, and is happening both driven by sort of hybrid work, right? After the pandemic, and people, I think, really, there's just been so many conversations about this, but, really questioning work-life balance, and wanting more work-life balance, right? And, in addition to changes in technology, right? I think that the fascinating thing is that, normally a big shift in sort of the workplace model happens at the same time that there's a shift in technology, right? And having lived in San Francisco for 25 years, I had a front row seat to that, right? So it was sort of like, we went through the 8-bay cube hierarchical, it was about sort of metrics and, square foot per person. And there was no, who cared about user experience, right? It was about sort of the CFO being happy with the with the spreadsheet, right, and it had nothing to do with with the employee, right, or the talent. We went from that to sort of open desking or whatever, but there was still hierarchy in terms of different office. Some people were still in offices, some people were in open plan, right? And that was sort of when the internet revolution sort of came around, right? And then we went to this sort of whole social media thing, with the rise of like the Facebooks of the world, or or the apps, whether it be Uber, Airbnb, or any of the other, Facebook, right? Any of the others, right? Instagram, et cetera, right? And that, all of a sudden it became all about, sort of the user experience, right? And them really wanting to hire the best and brightest, right? And to represent who they were as an organization through their space, right? And so even though the workplace model didn't change that much, I think the aesthetic changed pretty radically. And this one's big, and it started after the pandemic where, a lot of our clients are saying, we need to draw people back into the office, right? I think that they see the value of the human connection, right? And in some ways, I think if we look at Amazon, right, what they say is like, since the pandemic, they've hired something like 800,000 people or something. And a lot of those people have never like touched and felt and experienced the culture, right? And if you're just doing everything online, they haven't been
you can't integrate them,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, a physical space is a place for us to come together as humans and feel that common bond and the energy that happens, as human beings, which is really, really critical, right? So this one, I think, is driven sort of by that. But then I think the big question is, what's going to happen with AI, right? And we're just starting to scratch the surface, right? And so again, if these major shifts in sort of the workplace models and design are also driven by shifts in technology, I think this one's probably going to be a really big one, So it's sort of like the post-pandemic hybrid world plus, this whole thing that's being driven by really the revolution in AI, right? And so, and it's been fascinating to sort of watch, and I think coming from San Francisco, where everyone's always sort of rah rah, like, oh, this is so cool, right? All these apps are cool, or Facebook's cool, or or whatever, and then all of a sudden, like being here, people are a little more skeptical. They're a little bit more like, oh, I'm not, they're not so sure about technology. They're not so sure about AI. Of course, people are, they're worried about, losing their jobs. But as I often say to them, especially in the UK, like, the jobs in the Industrial Revolution are not the jobs of today, right? Like there's this constant shift, right? So us staying, change is constant, and I think Arthur Gensler always used to say, like, if something's not working for you, change it, right? So, so I think we're all going to have to adapt and grow and change with the times, right? And see what this does for our industry. But yes, when back to sort of the workplace model, I think has changed significantly, and our clients now say they want the office to be as comfortable as your home, right? And that is a way to draw people back. So we're seeing, just the aesthetic of the office change radically. I mean, we are designing hotels. It looks like, there's, we're doing a big project right now in Paris. There's 7 different restaurant experiences. It's a big project. It's like over 300,000 square feet. There are 7 different restaurant experiences, right? And they are designed as restaurants. They're beautiful spaces unto themselves, whether it be a French theme or Italian theme or, et cetera, et cetera. And they all sort of, they mirror that. And the goal is to get their people back in the office. They know they're probably not going to be coming in 5 days a week. If they want to, they're welcome to. But like, they're happy with them coming in 3 days a week so that they can touch and feel and, experience the culture, right? And I think that's sort of, where the world is at the wonderful world of workplace is at the moment. So
for the big league, workplace, where you can build, where you have the resources to do this kind of thing. I just think of our business. We're a small business, and as I'm talking with people, and I love all these great ideas, all these different kinds of experiences that you can incorporate, but there are limitations that, smaller businesses can have and that kind of thing. So it's great. I love being able to talk, somebody like you, that they've got these beautiful projects that is really incorporating the best of everything, best thought, best everything. Do you ever get approached by like a smaller firm or something like that? Or do you have kind of ideas that you can just say, if you're a small to mid-sized company and you just want to add something, you're able to do that. Is it that easy to kind of, yeah?
Yeah. So I think it's approaching the project. I mean, that's a great question because I think people probably think Gensler and, we only do these huge projects or whatever. Of course, we have some very large projects, right? But we also have a lot of really small projects, and for me personally, a lot of my career was sort of built on these smaller projects, right? And we just finished last year a small advertising firm here. It's based in London. And they were amazing because they were just like, they kind of knew that they needed to do something different, right? And they'd been in space, they'd grown quite rapidly over the course, and they'd been very successful. And, over the course of many years, and they were just in space that, they hired as is space, right? And they moved in, the furniture may have been there, and they'd make small changes, whatever they could afford. And this was the first time that they were wholesale starting from scratch, right? And it wasn't a big budget, it was actually a very lean budget. But what we basically did was apply this thinking around workplace experience, right? Because I think, you've probably heard of the Gensler Workplace Survey, right? And, again, every year, like for probably the past 4 or 5 years, experience has been at the top of the list, right? So then the question is like, how do we create that experience on a budget, for a smaller firm, right? And that was really about reapportioning the space. There's a very large, for the small floor plate, but, it's all relative. It's probably a third of the floor is just taken up by a big community space, right? Which doubles as cafe, event space, people co-work there, and the aesthetic of that, it's in Soho. You're in London, which is if you've ever been to West London, most people come when they come to London. It's a very vibrant, like if you go on Friday and Saturday night, it's like, I think there's an expression, like if you don't feel alive and, coming to Soho on a Saturday night or something where you're dead. Yeah. So, yeah. It's a very, very vibrant neighborhood, right? And it was sort of like, so it was easy to kind of riff off of that, right? And to kind of bring a calmer version of that, into the office, right? And so it has a very sort of London aesthetic, it feels like it could be a, part pub, part restaurant, part hotel, right? And then of course there's still, the typical work areas with sit-stand desks and other kinds of things. But even those, we're doing more and more to kind of make those look less corporate, whether it be color or form or, other types of things, to kind of take it into kind of a brave, this brave new world of really hospitality meets workplace. And so I don't think it matters really in terms of, budget. It's how you approach it. And again, this model that has shifted, right? And but I mean, that's a great question, because it's, I think we really do believe in design for all. And Arthur Gensler always used to say, like, every project, whether we're designing a 600 meter, wine bottle, the 600 meter tower in Shanghai or whatever, like they're all great opportunities, and we're going to put the same level of energy, towards them as we would, a bigger project. So
it can be daunting to think about this. I want to get your perspective on something that feels like, for me, a real tension in the workplace design right now. And we were talking about kind of the hybrid and the AI, but I'm just going to go in a different direction here. There's been a lot of progress around neurodesign and human-centered design, really thinking about how environments support different modes of work, different cognitive needs, and overall experience. But at the same time that there's this strong push to return to office, and not every organization has the ability or maybe even the willingness to fully invest in those kinds of environments. From a design leadership perspective, do you see a disconnect there? And how much does the quality of the environment actually influence whether people want to come back and engage with the workplace?
Huge. And I think that, again, our workplace survey really, really supports that. If you, I'm old enough that I'm probably underdiagnosed something.
Yeah, right.
ADHD or ADD.
We managed to fly under the radar.
Yeah, right. But for me, it's like, even when I go enough, it's like, I have to have my spot, right? And it's like, I'm very particular or whatever, right? And sort of like, but again, kind of going back to this advertising firm, that was a huge push for us, right? Because, and the CEO was amazing. She's like, I want to make sure that everybody feels welcome here, right? So again, they didn't have the money, they don't have a huge budget to provide, Zen spas and all these other things or whatever that some of our clients, or sound baths and all these things that some clients might do, yoga rooms. But there are spaces that are they're the coloration, we have very sort of, soothing sort of, entirely, the entire, kind of the entire room is sort of monochromatic, and it's like there's nothing jarring about it, right? There's not pattern. It's just a simple, soothing color, and that's in the furniture, and the walls and the carpet, so that, and that's just, there's a few rooms we have a quiet, there is a quiet library, right, that someone could go, and the rules in there that you can't be on your cell phone, right? You're just there to work, right? So again, it's not, I don't think it's about, creating spaces that are inclusive, or, I think we're all learning kind of how to do that. It has to do with pattern, it has to do with light, it has to do with noise, and providing that variety of spaces, that someone can go, right? So, again, our survey sort of reinforced that, right? That they sort of now flexibility is key in terms of, and it's not flexibility in terms of a bunch of movable furniture, it's flexibility in terms of me as a human. I have different needs than you or others, right? And so making sure that there's somewhere in that workplace that someone can go, that that they'll feel comfortable, right? They'll feel appreciated, and they'll be able to continue to be productive.
Do you get a report from somebody else, or do you guys conduct that kind of analysis of looking to cover what everybody, the workers, all kind of would feel comfortable with, their specific needs? Or is that an HR kind of report that you get from the company?
Usually there's not an HR report. It usually comes to us more from the perspective of this wasn't my project, so I probably can't speak as intelligently about it as Megan, the designer that did it, that we did for Virgin Media last year, right? And they came to them with the mandate that this has to be, which is actually very UK. The UK, I think, people here are very, very supportive, of the differences, right? If you design a project for BBC or whatever, it's included, period, right? So it's almost like they're coming to us, sort of like sustainability, right? They'll come to us and say, we want to do LEED, we want to do BREEAM. These are the kinds of things, right? They'll come and they'll say, sometimes we work with a consultant, they might hire an outside consultant, and sometimes, we also work with the big bank. They actually bring a consultant in, right? And they'll look at all of our furniture, they'll look at our finishes, they'll look at our lighting to make sure that it's not jarring, right? That there's not something about the patterns, that are going to set people off or whatever, right? So it's like, but it's something that I think we've all learned through working with these consultants, right? Or a request from our clients. And again, I think we've just scratched the surface in terms of exactly how to do it. But, more and more and more designers are really, I think designers, we're adapting our approach to make sure that it is something that is top of mind. And I mean, I love the earlier career people that I work with, because for them, it's just like, it's a given. Right? It's not something that even the client has to ask for. They're going to make sure that, that we're designing for it.
Yeah, it seems like it's kind of a new thing over here in the States, but it sounds perhaps more progressed over there.
I can't speak, I've been here now just 7 years. So, I mean, it was definitely something that we were talking about, but I don't know to this degree, right? And I think that is like a beautiful generational shift, right? Because it's sort of like, the other fascinating thing about workplaces, I think it's also like, if we think of the tall 8x8 cubes or whatever, right? Like that was a more closed society, right? It's like people were more, you had your work life and your personal life, right? And then we always talked about, those two worlds merging or whatever, but like they've merged now, right? For the generations that are working in the workplace, they don't care if you're purple, green, orange, yellow, or whatever, right? And they all like stand up for you, right? And so it's sort of like, as society has opened up, I think the workplace has opened up, right? The walls have sort of come down and you're able to bring your own best authentic self into the workplace, right?
Yeah, it's like a glee club kind of thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, which is really important, right? Because I think, it was one of the great things about the Valley, because I remember, I was at a social event or whatever, and I was talking with the founders of Intuit, and he was saying like, I don't, and he wasn't like, they said to me like, I don't care if you're purple, green, or whatever. Like, if you're really good at what you do, that like bring it, And that's why he wanted people to be their authentic selves, at work, and that mindset has been there for a while. So I think that's, maybe in the U.S. there's parts that isn't true, but I think there are parts where it's very true, and that's in many ways driven by, I think, tech firms are the ones, these people that are sort of innovating the future of the world in a lot of ways, right? And I think in somewhere like here, it's just part of society, right? Because I think people are tolerant and open and wanting to support each other.
Hey, have you noticed how complicated workspace planning can get? Between priorities, costs, and endless decisions, it's easy to lose track of what really matters. At Novalink, we cut through that complexity with a product and a process designed to simplify the journey. Our experienced team walks with you every step of the way, bringing knowledge, guidance, and a practical plan you can trust. If that kind of support sounds right for you, just click the QR code or see the link in the show notes. All right, back to the conversation.
As a bit of a follow-up, you've worked on projects where the workplace is really an extension of brand and experience, like Airbnb and other major tech environments. Do you think that level of intentionality is becoming necessary now rather than optional if companies expect people to return?
Absolutely. Like 100%, right, is more important than ever, right? Because if, again, kind of going back to the Amazon example, right, what's the purpose of the workplace though? I mean, the purpose of the workplace is to have, me as talent coming into the organization, feel, touch, experience what the culture is, right? And, as the great Bruce Mao, says, like, everything communicates, right? So obviously we have oral communication, we have written communication, right? But a space communicates something, right? And if you come in and it's like super uptight and, but it's like, oh, just, over-organized or what, it's like that communicates something, right? Versus coming into a space that's comfortable, right? And it's like, maybe it's even, maybe some bad word for architects, but a little bit decorated, right? There's interesting things on the shelving, there's things to look at, there's amazing art, there's amazing branding, right? So I think the entire package now is a three-dimensional representation of who that organization is, and it is communicating a message to their people that they're valued, right? And then also the values of the organization, right? And I think for a long time, we used to talk about that, but it was almost like we put stickers on the wall to say, we value blah, 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 whatever, right? And at the time that was really revolutionary because that hadn't been done before. But now I think it's like, it's holistic, right? In terms of, if an organization's saying they're sustainable, and they have these, target neutrality targets, right? Or carbon neutrality, targets, right? Or inclusion targets, whatever. And you come in and the workspace is in no way supporting you, and, I don't know, they're using a bunch of toxic materials because it was cheaper, right? Or whatever, right? That sends a message that, that they're not kind of putting their money where their mouth is. But, which I think is also fascinating, because the other thing we're starting to see is that, it used to be that real estate oftentimes, most of the time, actually reported to the finance, to the CFO. And now we're starting to see more and more that it's, the chief talent officer, the chief, human resources officer, and their emphasis is on their people, right? And the health and well-being of their people, and making sure that they're, again, that they can bring, their full self to work, that they're taken care of by the organization, for at least from a space perspective.
Are you finding any resistance to return to office, or is it too soon to tell, do you think?
Yes, there is resistance, right? I think most people are, but I think they're doing it on their terms, right? I don't think mandates really work now. Again, the survey kind of reinforced that, right? Any of the firms that have mandated these things, people are still finding ways to do what they need to do, right? And I think that's important, right? That we support that. If we're not creating an environment that's attractive enough for them to come in, or it's hard for them to come in or whatever, then we haven't really done our jobs, right? So if we have put time and attention into creating a place that is special for them, right, then I think they do come in, right? But yeah, of course, there's always people that are going to be resistant, right? I think, thank goodness now we're more, I think we acknowledge, right, especially like working parents or, dog parents or whatever, it's hard, right, working parents, like, my hat off to them. It's like, I don't know how they do it sometimes, but, of course we're going to give them the flexibility that they need. I think that's the other sort of major theme, right, that keeps coming into the survey, is like flexibility is really key.
Flexibility, yeah.
Yeah. And, I think, at least for Gensler, we trust our people, right? There's very few people that abuse it, but I think as creatives, me as a designer, it's important that I also help, especially people that may not have had a lot of experience, right, to understand that, like, the human connection and the sparks and the creativity that come out of being together as humans is way greater than trying to do it over Teams or a Zoom call or whatever, right? It happens, but it takes a lot of time, and maybe as the tools and the technology catches up, it's getting better and better, but, maybe there'll become a time when that same energy is there, but there's still something that's a little bit separate, right? And I think that what I've seen is, like, the best work comes out of people coming together, right? And when you're brainstorming, you're surveying, and that, even if that's for a short period of time, right, that can take the team, a long way in terms of, its effectiveness and doing the best work we can.
Yeah, I think, being, meeting in person, you get, all the kind of body language, and you get to read each other a little bit more. Humor can come across better,
Mm-hmm.
So there is an opportunity for camaraderie to develop, in those times, and spontaneous things to happen. And I just always feel like on this, okay, this is allotted for this amount of time. And in-person meetings can be like that too, but there's always you're leaving, and then that little extra conversation happens that once you hang up, you're done. You're not going to have that hallway conversation and that kind of thing. So now, when you say workplace design needs to become frictionless, what does that word mean to you in concrete project terms, and what does it not mean?
To become frictionless means that the office or the space is not in my way of me doing my job, right? That, if you come in and it's hard to navigate the space, right? Maybe you're going to a new office, you're with a global company organization, and you're going to the new office for the first time, or something, and you can't find your way around, you can't find people, you don't know where the coffee bar is, right? You don't know where the toilets are, or whatever it is, right? So it's sort of like, there's sort of that element, but it's also like, how do we take the pain points out of it for people so that, that it's much more fluid.
I just want to jump back a second, talking about, getting together in person. Do you find, talking about kind of a very wide range now of recognized kind of different personality types and work types, and everything that the neurodesign attempts to accommodate and that kind of thing. Do you find that being in person in general still an applicably good format, or is all of this kind of neurodesign, like, basically, do you find that people adapt well to working in person together, or are you finding that there's fragmentation, that you have to accommodate people kind of in different ways, or is it still just the same old world and we can still get the same work done in the same way, generally speaking?
I don't know if I completely understand the question, but part of it is like, I think people are amazingly adaptable, right? I mean, those of us of a certain generation like me, we don't really have a choice but to adapt, right? And so I do think that people are very flexible, at least of a certain generation. I think the younger people are a little bit more like, no, you have to help me with my situation, right? So, and that's fine. But I mean, they're standing up for what they need, and they should, right? And if the organization isn't willing to adapt with them, then shame on the organization. But so I think adaptation comes from both sides, right? It's both the talent and the employer, right? Who we have to work together to kind of figure out a happy place. And of course, we're never going to take care of everybody, right? So I mean, this is but we can at least make an effort and try.
I'm just thinking back, like there was always people in meetings who maybe didn't participate for one reason or another, and now we're just trying to kind of accommodate and pay attention to them and personally kind of welcome them in and bring them in. I think there's more attention to that. So, but I think kind of in a way, the old style of working still works, and maybe that's not clear enough. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think some of what we are touching on though is probably leadership, right? Like you or me as a leader, we need to, if they're, I'm ironically, like I'm an introvert, when I did, and I've had to work really hard to learn to speak up, right? And to like, oh my gosh, like before public speaking, I wouldn't sleep for like a month before, right? It's crazy. And now it's like, I don't even think about it. It's like, of course I do my research and I'm prepared, whatever. So it's like, then I don't get too stressed out. But like, of course you get nervous and you get, you get butterflies. But like, what's interesting about that is like, I think it's a leadership thing, right? That we as leaders have had to learn to adapt our leadership style, I always try to make a point. I'm not perfect at this, but I always try to make a point that, if we're meeting with a team and there are some people that are shyer, right? And, or more introverted or whatever, to ask them what they think, right? And sometimes they speak up and sometimes they don't. And oftentimes when they do speak up, they actually have the most fascinating point of view, right? And there's some people that just think they need to talk all the time and everything they're saying is fascinating, right? Or whatever. But like, anyway, so navigating how to like kind of get them to like allow space for other people to speak, right? And I think that's gotten better though too, because again, I think because the early career people are more aware of each other, right? And and I think they give each other space, right, and support. And I find them very positive, right, and very supportive. It's kind of a beautiful thing. They're really, really supportive of each other, and I think feeling that support, then I think more and more people feel comfortable, right, to be able to speak up, right, and to claim their or to state their vision or whatever it is that they might want to share. But
I always love hearing about people's experiences with new workers coming in and kind of the blend and how that all works out. And it comes down to leadership.
I mean, the one thing that I would ask, which is like, I think sometimes I do think the early career people sort of look at the older people and go like, oh, you're narrow-minded or you're this or whatever. But it's like, they have to kind of remember there was people like us that fought for this new world that they're in, right? So it's sort of like, and I hope they don't forget that, because it's like, that wasn't easy, because there was a lot of people that like, whether it be women or
it's
gays
the entitlement,
or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, they don't realize, where it's coming from. Yeah.
A lot of struggle, a lot of personal struggle in order to make that happen, right? And a lot of them are very appreciative, though I have to say. So it's not, I don't think they're entitled. It's just, I don't think there's an awareness, right? So it's like sometimes, but
there's still a full level of commitment still yet to be given, So this could phase in, this could phase out, so depending on how things go. So like, behave yourselves, do a good job, make it a winning model here for us to to really care this much. It's an unprecedented amount, I think, that we're caring now.
And they're amazing. I mean, they really are. I learn so much from them every day, right? I really, really do. And they inspire me, they challenge me, right? It's like, so I don't know. It's refreshing. Yeah. I personally, I love it, but yeah, it gets me up in the morning. So yeah, it keeps me on my toes and keeps me engaged in this industry, which I love. And the people they're amazing. I mean, the people in our industry really are amazing. You get a group of designers together and there's this special bond that happens, right? It is magic. It really is.
And it's the future. You're involved in the future, and there's nothing really quite as exhilarating as that. You're looking at technology, you're looking at the people, you're saying, look at all the opportunities that there are here. And so, they're lucky to have you in the place that you are.
Yeah, and the future's bright. I will say that. Because I see them and I'm just like, wow. Like some of them are just like, wow, Yeah, and that's fun to watch, right? And to watch them grow. And so I know we're in really, really good hands as we move forward. So
I love it. Which of the inherited workplace design rules do you think have the shortest shelf life left? And why are they the hardest to let go inside of a practice?
Hierarchy is still a little bit there in certain industries, certain sectors, right? I think it's gone in the technology sector, I think though there are, not to call them out, but I do think that there's still, there are still some sectors that are still a little bit stuck on hierarchy, and that is starting to go away though, like slowly but surely, we're starting to see it. So they're sort of like late to the game a little bit, but I would say hierarchy. I think the organizations that just build a space and still focus on the bottom line, it's all about schedule and budget or whatever. Like you're not going to get a successful space, and you can still meet a schedule and you can still design an amazing space on a low budget. It's just a different mindset, and what you put forward is what you're going to value and what your objectives and strategy is for the project. And, so it's not about how much money you spend or don't spend or whatever, right? It's about a mindset and having that vision and challenging the designers from the onset and supporting them in delivering that vision.
Going back to hierarchy, do you think that because in my research, it was like, well, if the leader is not visible, there's no motivation then to try and become a leader, if there's no kind of maybe separation or kind of special desk that person works at, for example. You want to aspire to something greater. Do you think that's disappearing and people are just saying, hey, I'm just going to be in my lane, and I know there's enough tools out there, especially in today's world, that if I'm not being recognized here or moving up in the company here, there's going to be something else I can do?
The physical space, I think, who cares, right? Like, I sit in the open, where you're free to dress. I think it's more now about who the leaders are as people and the example that they're setting, right? And is that inspirational to the folks that are, that they're working with, right? And I also think, again, those walls have really come down a lot of ways, in terms of, I do think they feel they can speak up, that they have a voice. I think that was the culture, that they grew up in, or the kind of environment, the kind of society that they grew up in.
I have a 7-year-old daughter, and we're looking, I'm looking at different schools, and one of the schools is, it's an all-girls school, and they really want to cultivate the girls to become contributors and leaders, to leave their mark, to focus in their life. I'm going to leave my mark. And I said, oh, that's kind of neat. But that might be where we're all kind of headed, that the children are being taught, every single person, can be a contributor, can be a leader in their own way. And so we become a society of, thoughtful leaders, giving each other the room to do our own thing and recognizing each other. That's kind of maybe the utopia or something that we're striving towards. You've called interior design part of an old system. For an interior designer listening today and feeling defensive potentially, what would you tell them is broken and what is still worth keeping?
I do think in some of the creative fields, I think there are systems that are still sort of a little bit stuck. Hopefully that will change. I think interior design, especially commercial interior design, I do think because of the nature of our clients and what we're challenged to do, there may be aspects of it that are old or whatever, but like I think we have to, in order to stay relevant, we constantly have to be rethinking, reinventing, pushing forward, right, to new places, because that's what our clients are doing, right? And I think we mirror our clients, and it's without our clients, we don't exist, right? So it's like, I think we're very fortunate that we get to work with some of the best and brightest clients in the world, and who take us new places, right? We hopefully take them new places, but I think they take us new places too. So, I can't, I do think though, I don't want to call anybody out or any sectors, but I think there's adjunct industry parts of our industry, right, that need to adapt and change, and it's hard, right? Because you're set on a business model, you're set on certain things or whatever, and the ones that do adapt with the times will prosper, and the ones that don't, as we see.
You describe yourself as a soft modernist and a left and right brain designer. How does that show up in the trade-offs you make between experience, ergonomics, and aesthetics on a brief?
I think, in some ways, even that statement is probably a little bit, is it relevant anymore? Like, I think, I definitely believe in sort of contemporary design, right, and modern design, because I think, like, at heart, I am probably more of a sort of, a mid-century modernist, but the soft part is like, adding the human touch. It's not so, everything's so rigid and whatever that we sort of lose the human, right? And I think even for me, the modernist part is starting to subside, and sort of the human aspect is starting to rise even more. And so I think it's again, back to this thing of like drawing people back to an office or to a space or whatever, right? I think if the human's not there and the experiential thing isn't there, then that's probably not going to be a place that people want to be, right? So while, in my heart as a designer, I'd love everything to be really, organized and whatever, right? Like, not everybody, that's not what everybody appreciates, right? So it's like, it's for me to, again, to provide and design spaces that, from the soft perspective, appeal to everybody and provide that humanity, And I think what's interesting though, like sort of to go to sustainability, one of the things we're seeing is like, because we're doing these more hospitality spaces, the only thing that I kind of question is like, it requires oftentimes a lot of materials and a lot of different things, right? And is that the best thing to do for the environment, right? Or do we need to sort of reevaluate that and say, how do we create spaces people want to be, but that they're also really sustainable, right? And in some ways, modernism, like a really stripped, simple space, can do that because you're using the least, right? And when you're using more, is that sustainable? So that's the only thing that I sort of, struggle with in my head right now is like, how do we sort of balance those two worlds, right? And is there a way to still keep the space superhuman and not be using, 300 finishes in a project or something, or whatever it might be, although we're probably keeping a lot of different organizations very happy by using a lot of different things. But so that's the only, and again, I don't know what's right or wrong, but we're in the midst of that, right? And it'll be fascinating to sort of see how that plays out, But I think circularity plays a big part of that, which is kind of fascinating. Like if, in the Netherlands, the government actually mandated that projects use 70% reuse of furniture, and so, there's probably a way, so I think we can still create these very humanistic space, right? Humanistic type spaces, right? That are rich and visually interesting and stuff. It just may not be that it's all new furniture, right? We may be, or so we might be curating a lot of used furniture or vintage furniture or whatever into a space. So I think that's probably kind of the future.
Which really appeals to, I know the millennials for sure, the thrift shop and kind of upcycle culture that they have.
Which was appealing to my generation too. Is this? I don't know. You're probably too young, but like, did you have Value Village in Toronto?
That was the place to go. all the treasures that you could
was there
find
all
there.
the time. Like,
right?
I'm like, my mom was like, I don't know about this. I don't know if that's healthy for you or something. Like, it wasn't like a physical healthy. It was like a mental healthy. I don't know what she thought. Actually, I need to ask her that. But anyway, but she was worried about me going, but I bought all these vintage clothes because it was cool, right? You know?
I mean, there were all the, what was it called? Well, you know, you get the old military boots and the jackets because, you know, I grew up in the 90s. So it was like, you know, the big black boots and whatever. The reused stuff. And my mom just thought, what is happening to my daughter? But, you know, but yeah, Value Village, oh my gosh, I just saw
It was a flashback. Sorry. That took you
That
there.
was great. I'm just thinking mugs, you know, all the crazy mugs and, you know, albums. And are they still around? I wonder.
Think so. I think
they
they're
must
still
be
in
still
Vancouver
around.
because I remember when I was just there, I thought it would.
That is
I think it's
so
still
funny.
There.
I have to
It's
go
probably
back.
hotter than ever, right? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I guess as we got older, you know, we don't really do that anymore. Our generation, maybe we do. I don't know, but I just find that because I also get involved with art here, you know, and a lot of people come in and they say, well, we just like to buy our art from the thrift stores and everything that, you know, they try to do everything, all the furniture that they get is really, I feel like they're more intentional and more mindful from the millennials. Whereas I was never thinking, I think we grew up with like IKEA, like just bring it all in. But, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, and then you'd find you'd find these like mid-century finds that were like, wow, right? Like a really cool chair or an ashtray or, you know, I don't know, some magazine stand or a chair or something. And that was like, ooh, what, you know, a treasure. That's a treasure. Yeah.
We've got, I can't remember the name of it, but we've got like a thrift store and sometimes it's just fun just to go down and see all the kettles and stuff like that they still have. So what do you miss about Canada?
What do I miss about Canada? Oh, the beauty. It's so pretty, right? The people are so nice. I miss my family, obviously.
Well, I mean, Vancouver, you have the mountains. I mean, holy smokes. Yeah.
Skiing.
Vancouver Island and all
stunning.
that stuff.
Yeah. It was a very active city, right? Like you have to, I think to survive the rainy winters, you have to be very active, right? And I kind of miss that, right? Because it's just part of the culture, you know, and you're outside all the time and boating and this and that and skiing, you know, boating in the summer and skiing in the winter, you know. But yeah, no, it's London's a really amazing place to live though, so I'm not going to complain, but yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's just different. My brother was working in, he worked in the film industry doing like 3D animation stuff for a while. So he was in London he was in London too, but in Vancouver, and I went out to visit him and he took me to this place called, I think it was called Morrissey's for poutine. So that was my big memory of visiting him in Vancouver, but it was nice. Across Apple, Pixar, Nike, Samsung, and Airbnb, you have seen the highest stakes workplace briefs in the world. What is a single pattern that separates a project that feels right from one that just looks right?
I think when the organization is being genuine, right? When they're coming to us with a brief and allowing us to interpret the brief, right? Or not allowing us, but, you know, that we interpret the brief kind of through their eyes and that it's authentic. You know, I think it's really kind of that simple, right? When it kind of comes from an inauthentic place where they don't really know who they are, if they're willing to be on a journey to help us, you know, us to help them discover who they are from a physical space standpoint, that's very rewarding. But yeah, I think it's like when they're being authentic, right, and being true to what they say.
Sustainability and ergonomics often get treated as separate boxes on a workplace brief. In your human-first design language, how do they actually connect? And where do designers most often get the connection wrong?
If you think of everything we need to know now, I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? We need to know something about sustainability. We need to know something about ergonomics. We have to understand some element of brand. We have to understand sort of the digital world, right? You know, we have to understand AV. You know, it's like, you know, I think it's all things that we are in our toolkit, right? To be able to exploit in a positive way to the fullest, right? And so sustainability, you know, I think sustainability is about health, right? Ergonomics is about health, right? So I think that's the common connection is around health, right? Health of the individual, health of the planet. That's what I would probably see was the common connection there.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been a real fun time.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been
talking
really fun.
about stuff.
Yeah, with a fellow Canadians.
With a fellow Canadian.
Yeah.
Always fun. And a surprise. I had no idea, so that's great.
Thanks for checking out Workspace Design Lab. If you're an architect, interior designer,
or workplace professional looking to stay ahead in ergonomic office design and modern workspace interiors, make sure to follow the show on your favorite podcast platform. For more resources on sustainable office furniture and human-centered workspace design, visit us at novalink.com. Until next time.